I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a bias that I keep noticing, an elitist gateway is actually what it is, that I keep noticing in these documentaries I'm listening to about NES, really Famicom era RPGs. And that's that in order to be an RPG, you have to be able to create your own character. That in order to be a role playing game, you have to be able to choose your role. That's insane. That doesn't a role playing game make. I can make my shepherd, but I don't get to decide everything my shepherd does. In fact, the things that my shepherd does in Mass Effect through the narrative of the story are oftentimes the opposite of what I think are going to come from what I say. That's insane. You are playing a role within the story. JRPGs actually get so meta on this. Final Fantasy, for example, gets so meta on this that the role you are actually playing in the story is the player, and that no choice you can make because of the constraints of the narrative of the role you are playing can stop the game from starting back over at one. There's no ending other than the ending at the that you are given. And your role is to get these nameless characters to that ending. That's your role that you are playing in Final Fantasy. And so whether you're playing the role of of piloting Zelda to the end of the game, or you're playing the role of getting Duke Nukem to the end of the game, or you're playing the role of getting the fucking master detective, whatever his name is, Master Sergeant or whatever from Halo, getting him to the end of the game, you are always role playing in every video game. The depth to which you go to the character is irrelevant. Do you not understand that role playing is acting? No actor writes their own script, not as they're going through the movie. Nobody sits down and writes the movie as it's going along. The roles within the story that are being told are defined by and constrained by the end of the story. If you were playing a truly open-ended RPG like what you want at your what you want your games like Baldur's Gate 3, or what you want, or what you say you want at your D&D tables, are games that eventually you will become so overwhelmed with that you stop showing up to the table and the game because there are too many choices to be made. I'm fine. Amia. Hello, Isaiah. This notion, what makes a role-playing game a role-playing game is, frankly, character development. Madden has role-playing game elements, that is RPG elements, because you develop your players. The role-playing element is character development throughout the narrative of the game, throughout the gameplay loop of an RPG, of a role-playing game. The gameplay loop is character development, developing the character. When you are sitting down at an oral narrative, everything you do is developing the character, because you are participating in real time with what you know is an improvised situation between you and the DM and whatever players you're with. But when you sit down to play Final Fantasy IX, you are playing the role of Zidane. right? But you're also playing the role of the person making sure that all of these other people make smart choices in combats. So you're in the combat loop. So the game that you are playing is get these people smart enough to get through the next narrative gap. I'm not going to get to make any choices with what they do in the narrative because I'm not here to role play the story. I am here to play the role of getting them alive to the next part of the story. My job, my role and job are the same thing. My role in this company is to keep these assholes alive and kill the bad guys so that they can have the narrative dissonance of being funny or whatever else they're doing. It makes me crazy when people say that Final Fantasy III is the last RPG because it's the last one where you get to pick the jobs of your characters and their names and their blank slates. That does not an RPG make, and it makes me crazy. That is a specific kind of RPG, and it is always, always marketed to and more satisfying for the hardcore crowd. And so, if only hardcore RPGs get to call themselves RPGs, then nothing is an RPG. That's why Soulsborns don't even call themselves RPGs. They call themselves Soulsborns because the RPG, the character development, the world development is nothing in those games. They're action adventure games with RPG elements. And they know it. That's why they call themselves Soulsborns. They don't even call themselves an RPG, even though they have nominal RPG elements with the stats that don't mean anything. I've been watching a lot of documentaries about games, like the development of games like Dragon Quest. I watched Dragon Quest 4 today, and I watched the first 3 yesterday, and I watched Ys today, and the difference between the difference among all of the different RPGs is one of design philosophy, of what role is the player taking. And so one of the things that the documentary I was watching about Dragon Quest 4, well, actually wasn't a documentary, it was a retrospective review. He was playing on old Famicom technology and reviewing it. And one of the things that he kept constantly doing was that he wasn't critiquing the game on its design philosophy. So he would explain the design philosophy and then say that he didn't like it, but not critique how well they got to their goal. He's just like, I don't like their goal, so I'm not going to engage with it, or I'm going to bitch about it. And that's not review. The thing that separates these games, each game from each other game, whether it be Halo from Final Fantasy or Fortnite from Mahjong, is design philosophy. It's the human design. It's the intention of the gameplay. So when you sit down to play chess, the intent of the game is always the same. It's always to beat your opponent. And the choices that you make to do that are constrained by your skill. So there are actually fewer choices than you think there are to be made at any given time in a game of chess, the greater your skill level is, and the greater the skill level of your opponent. And Dragon Quest shows you this over and over and over across the first 4 games by making the bosses only beatable in a certain way without having to grind. You only have to get to a certain level in the dungeon in order to beat the boss if you do a specific thing. But that's a puzzle, where the combat itself, the gameplay loop itself, becomes not a grind to a certain level of power, but a puzzle to be solved. Problem solving. But this isn't how people play video games. People don't play video games as puzzles to be solved unless they know they're playing a puzzle game. But when you're making a video game, it's puzzle after puzzle after puzzle after puzzle after puzzle to be solved, and they're all oriented toward the player. Every single one of them is oriented to the player. And so what we can judge is how well we, the specific player, engage with the design elements. And this is why, like, companies like who make the Far Cry games? They make the Far Cry games. They make the Assassin's Creed games. I feel like it starts with a B, but it's not coming to me. Ubisoft. It's not made with it. It's not doesn't start with a B, but it has a B in it. Ubisoft. All their games have the same design philosophy. They have the same design elements. The design elements that have been boring for a decade. That were boring once we noticed that, oh, all of your games do this. Okay, this is a top-down decision that we don't love. Because that top-down decision, it strips away, because it's a design philosophy that's top-down in that way, it strips any game from having that specific thing to explore. It's like, okay, well, that we know is going to be in every game. So as a gamer, there's nothing there to explore, and we've been conditioned to play video games for this sense of exploration since the NES, since the Famicom, because the PC taught you how to explore it by having it. And so PC games could jump right into being for the hardcore gamer, because PC games, people went from tabletop to PC. They didn't go tabletop to console. Console was a gateway drug into gaming. And so those games in the early days, they had to be simple because they knew that the only people who owned and used the systems were children. And that if they were going to get adults to buy the systems and play it for their games, they had to be accessible, and they had to be deep, and they had to be engaging to play over and over and over and over again. So that by the time, like me today, I sat and I almost started Dragon Quest III for a third time. That's where the design philosophy matches up with player satisfaction and engagement. Because I started to get dissatisfied with the way that my players were developing, my characters were developing, which is my only job, is to develop these characters. My hero has been a high enough level to kill this boss if I want to do it with my own brute force, if I want to brute force it. But if I want to play the game the way it was designed to be played, and that's with all of your people on tactics and you watching, actually it's with you playing your character, but I put my character on a tactic too, because the idea is that my play calling system, my being a good offensive coordinator, my being a good coordinator of dungeons, crawl, all of this used to be stats that certain persons at the gameplay table built into their character sheet. Things like dungeoneering, things like leadership, things like charisma. There would be a character at the table who was good at those things, and the story usually oriented around them. And so Dragon Quest, from a design philosophy, has this hero character and these people that follow them toward the goal. The only thing that Final Fantasy broke away from that is didn't make any one character the hero. I'm done on that idea. I just hate this idea that what makes a role-playing game is dialogue trees and mediocre alternate endings. I hate that. That is not what makes a role-playing experience. When you go to work, you are playing a role. You are playing a role. You are role-playing. And the degree to which you play your role and you take that role play seriously is probably the degree to which you are paid seriously. That's paid, period, seriously, for emphasis. I'm enjoying Hyperdimension Neptunia more now that I've broken through the second chapter. The first two chapters are rough. They have a really cool. They have a different kind of combat system, and it's a little slow and tedious until you hit about level 25. They're all different. I like these games. I like the turn-based RPG. I especially like it when I can make it an auto battler. I don't like it that the auto battlers that I've run across on Steam are they take their design cues, they take their philosophical cues from mobile games and handhelds. Not handhelds, the mobile games, the predatory mobile games. The night's tonight. How you doing, Apollo? It's almost over. You see, something people don't understand is that, like, even in combat, you're still playing a role, right? And I don't think people fully appreciated this even while they were playing World of Warcraft. It's like, sure, you're not on a role-playing server, but you're still playing the role of tank. Still playing a role-playing game. And so the differences are in character development. And see, when we were still in the NES, the SNES, when we were still back then, it was pretty obvious which games were going to reward you with the opportunity for depth of character development, and which games weren't going to give you depth of character development. I'm not talking about any game, I'm talking about an entire genre. Hey, Bethany. So, before the PlayStation 3 era, whatever genre era, or not, whatever generation era that was, it was pretty obvious which games were RPGs and which games weren't, because a racing game didn't have the space. It just didn't have the RAM, and it didn't have the space on the disc to give you RPG elements. But RPGs with, when BioWare and KOTOR came out on the Xbox, whichever Xbox that was, 360 or whatever, and then Oblivion and Morrowind were huge on the Xbox, and then since then everything has had RPG elements, so it's harder to tell which games are and which games are not RPGs, and so people want to throw up that gate of, well, the only games that are truly RPGs are the ones where you get to create your character. And it's like, just because I can name Bart's doesn't make me want to play him any more or less within the rails that have been set up in the narrative that I'm playing through. My reward for playing the gameplay loop is the narrative. The idea that we're going to explore the narrative is... Deus Ex wasn't mixed into other genres. Deus Ex was only an RPG. That's what I'm saying. Deus Ex wasn't mixed into other genres. Deus Ex was only an RPG. Shooters have never not been RPGs. That's kind of what I'm saying. Shooters were always RPGs. Doom was drawn using the same map making technologies as any DM would use for D&D. It was originally conceived as you would have as your attacks would hit or miss and do damage based on dice rolls within the computer. Oh shit, I didn't actually get food. I had planned to get food when I finished this. So I guess I'm just gonna go just sit and pizza cottage tonight. Quake is an RPG, and you are developing your character. As you play through the narrative, you're getting more powerful weapons, you're getting more powerful armors, you're learning more about yourself and who you are within the world, and your character is absolutely making choices and doing things like killing the final boss. That is an RPG. That is exactly what people were doing at tabletops before video games. We're not... It's kind of what I'm saying. The RPG elements, RPG gameplay elements just mean character sheets. And yeah, everything is bringing everything brought character sheets into their video games because they had to compete with Morrowind and Oblivion and Skyrim and KOTOR and Fallout 3. Some of the biggest games in the universe were just and only RPGs. And they didn't have other genres elements. They had other genres gameplay. But again, the first-person shooter began as an RPG. It didn't begin as a different thing. Halo was going to be a tactical RPG. And then they realized this is easier. That's my entire argument, is that it makes me crazy. It makes me absolutely crazy that people think that sitting around and talking in a medieval European accent is what makes an RPG game a role-playing game. No. It's just from that perspective, the only thing that makes a role-playing game is a character sheet. And being fully yourself. And that's just a bad argument. A role-playing game is any game where you play a role. You are role-playing as Mario when you play Mario. Because seeing is doing, seeing is being. So when you're controlling that controller to make that guy move around, if it just happens to turn out that in cutscenes that guy doesn't actually have you and you get to watch him, it turns out that you're God. A whole bunch of video games have turned back on the fourth wall and said, "Huh, God must be piloting me between these cutscenes." This is a totally normal narrative construction that's been happening over the last 40 years, and we just ignore it. We ignore it in favor of genre convention. Alright, I'm too cold to be doing any more of this. I'm gonna go get something to eat.